The year was 2147, and the city of Nova Prime gleamed under a sky filled with floating drones and holographic advertisements. It was a place where everything moved fast. Cars zipped through the air, robots cleaned streets without missing a spot, and people lived longer than ever thanks to advanced medicine. But despite all the progress, something felt wrong. People smiled less, talked even less, and seemed empty inside. Far away from the shiny towers and neon lights, there was a small house surrounded by green fields. This was unusual because most of the land near Nova Prime had been turned into factories or parking lots long ago. The man who lived here didn't care about trends or technology. His name was Elias Warren, and he was 85 years old. Elias spent his days tending to his garden, reading books made of actual paper, and watching the sun rise and set. To anyone passing by, he might have looked like just another old man living quietly, but Elias wasn't ordinary. He had once been one of the smartest scientists in the world, working on inventions that changed how people lived. Now, he chose to stay away from the noise, preferring peace over fame. One sunny afternoon, a young woman arrived at Elias's doorstep. Her name was Lyra Callan, and she was a journalist. She had heard rumors about an old scientist living outside the city and decided to visit him for a story. Lyra was curious about people from the past, those who remembered life before machines took over everything. She thought it would be interesting to write about someone like Elias. When Elias opened the door, Lyra saw a tall, thin man with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried himself with calmness. "You must be Lyra," he said, smiling slightly. "I've been expecting you." Lyra blinked in surprise. "Expecting me? How did you know I was coming?" "I didn't," Elias replied. "But I figured someone would come eventually. Stories always find their way back to us." He invited her inside. The house was cozy and smelled like fresh herbs. There were no screens or gadgets, just wooden furniture, shelves full of books, and pictures hanging on the walls. Lyra noticed one photo in particular. It showed a younger Elias standing next to a large machine. He looked proud but also tired. "So," Elias began as they sat down at the kitchen table, "what brings you here?" Lyra explained her project. She wanted to interview people who had seen the world change over the decades. "Your work helped shape this city," she said. "I'd love to hear your thoughts." Elias chuckled softly. "My thoughts aren't worth much these days. Most people don't listen anyway." "Well, I'm listening," Lyra said firmly, "and maybe others will too." For a moment, Elias studied her face. Then he nodded. "All right, let's talk." As they spoke, Lyra quickly realized that Elias wasn't like other interviewees. He didn't brag about his achievements or complain about growing old. Instead, he shared stories that made her think deeply. "Back when I was your age," Elias began, "we believed we could fix every problem with science. Hunger, disease, aging, we thought we could solve them all. And in some ways we succeeded, but success comes with a price." "What kind of price?" Lyra asked. "The cost of losing ourselves," Elias said simply. "We built machines to do our work, but soon we forgot how to work together. We created tools to make life easier, but they only made us lazier. And now, well, look around. Everyone has everything they need, but no one seems happy." Lyra frowned. "Do you think we should go back to the way things were?" "No," Elias replied. "Going backward isn't the answer. The key is balance. Progress is good, but not if it takes away what makes us human." His words stuck with Lyra. She couldn't stop thinking about them as they continued talking. Elias told her about his early days as a scientist. He described working late nights in labs, dreaming of making the impossible possible. One of his proudest moments was helping develop neural implants, devices that allow people to access information directly in their minds. "But then I started noticing problems," Elias admitted. "People stopped learning things on their own. They relied too much on the implants. Conversations became shorter because everyone assumed the other person already knew what they were going to say. Relationships grew weaker. That's when I realized we were losing something important." "What'd you do?" Lyra asked. "I stepped back," Elias said. "I left the lab and came here. I wanted to remind myself what really matters: family, friends, nature, and the little joys in life. Things money and machines can't give you." By the time the sun began to set, Lyra felt like she had learned more in a few hours than she had in months of researching. Elias' advice was simple yet profound. He spoke about slowing down, appreciating the present, and remembering that life isn't just about surviving, it's about living. Before leaving, Lyra thanked Elias for his time. "I'll share your story with the world," she promised. "People need to hear what you have to say." Elias smiled gently. "Maybe they'll listen, or maybe they won't. Either way, I've done my part." As Lyra walked back to her car, she glanced back at the house one last time. Something about Elias stayed with her. A quiet strength, a deep wisdom. She knew his words would resonate with others, just as they had with her. Little did she know, this meeting was only the beginning of a journey that would change not only her life, but the entire world. The next day, Lyra couldn't stop thinking about Elias. His words echoed in her mind. Progress isn't worth it if we lose ourselves. She replayed their conversation over and over, trying to make sense of it all. What did he mean by losing ourselves? And why did his advice feel so important? Determined to learn more, she returned to his house. This time, she brought a notebook and pen, ready to document every detail. When Elias opened the door, he didn't seem surprised to see her again. "You're persistent," he said with a faint smile. "I like that." "I want to understand," Lyra replied honestly. "Your stories, they make me think differently. Can you tell me more?" Elias nodded and gestured for her to sit. As they settled at the kitchen table once more, he began sharing pieces of his life, moments that shaped him, mistakes he regretted, and lessons he learned along the way. A young scientist's dream. "When I was young," Elias started, "I wanted to change the world. Back then, humanity faced big problems: hunger, disease, war. I thought science could solve everything. So I worked hard, studied endlessly, and joined teams creating new technologies." He paused, staring out the window at the lush garden outside. "One of my first big projects was designing neural implants, the devices people now use to access information instantly. At first, everyone celebrated them. They thought they'd revolutionize education and communication. But soon, I noticed something troubling." "What happened?" Lyra asked, leaning forward. "People stopped learning how to think for themselves," Elias explained. "Instead of solving problems or remembering facts, they relied entirely on the implants. Conversations became shorter because no one bothered explaining things anymore. They assumed others could just look it up. Even creativity suffered. Why imagine something when the implant could show you an image instead?" Lyra frowned. "That sounds familiar. People today barely talk face-to-face. They rely on AI assistants and virtual chats." "Exactly," Elias said. "Technology can be helpful, but when it replaces human effort, we lose something precious. We forget how to connect with each other and with ourselves." The machine that predicted everything. Elias went on to describe another project he had worked on, a machine designed to predict human behavior. It analyzed patterns and data to forecast what individuals might do next. Governments and corporations loved the idea, believing it would prevent crime and improve efficiency. At first, it seemed amazing, Elias recalled. The machine could guess which neighborhoods needed extra police patrols or which products someone might buy. But then, things got complicated. "How so?" Lyra pressed. "Well, imagine living in a world where every decision feels predetermined. If the machine says you'll commit a crime tomorrow, does that mean you don't have a choice? Or worse, what if authorities arrest you before you even act? Where's the freedom in that?" Lyra shuddered. "That sounds terrifying." It was, Elias agreed. People started losing trust in each other. Neighbors reported neighbors, afraid they might be flagged as risks. Families argued because the machine suggested certain behaviors were wrong. Eventually, I realized we weren't building tools to help humans. We were controlling them. Disgusted by what he had helped create, Elias left the project. He vowed never to work on anything that stripped away personal freedom, but the guilt stayed with him for years. A message from space. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Elias shared one final story, one he rarely told anyone. It was about a discovery he made decades ago, long before retiring to his quiet home. "One night, while analyzing signals from space, I found something unusual," he said quietly. "It wasn't random noise, it was a message, an alien signal." Lyra's eyes widened. "Aliens? You're serious?" "Yes," Elias confirmed. The message was simple: beware the cost of perfection. At first, I thought it was a warning about technology, but later I realized it meant more than that. Perfection isn't just about machines. It's about goals. Humanity strives for perfection, to live forever, to control nature, to conquer the stars. But chasing perfection often blinds us to what truly matters. "Did you tell anyone?" Lyra asked. "No," Elias admitted. "I kept it secret. I feared people would panic or misuse the information. Instead, I decided to focus on teaching others through my actions. I hoped someone would figure out the truth someday. Lessons for today." By the time Elias finished speaking, Lyra felt overwhelmed. His stories weren't just history, they were reflections of her own world. The shiny city of Nova Prime, with its endless gadgets and perfect systems, suddenly seemed hollow. She thought about the protests happening downtown, where angry citizens demanded fairness and meaning. Could Elias' advice offer a solution? "Why are you telling me all this?" she finally asked. "Because you're listening," Elias said simply. "Most people ignore these warnings until it's too late. But you care. Maybe you can help spread the message." Lyra nodded. "I'll try, but what should I do first?" Elias smiled gently. Start small. Share my stories. Write about the dangers of chasing perfection without considering the cost. And remember, real change begins with individual choices, not grand plans. A new perspective. On her drive back to the city, Lyra reflected on everything Elias had said. His lessons about balance, connection, and humility resonated deeply. For the first time, she questioned whether the futuristic society she lived in was truly better, or if it had lost its soul somewhere along the way. Back in her apartment, she opened her laptop and began typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she wrote about Elias's wisdom. She titled the article, "An 85-year-old man's life advice that will change how you see the world." Within hours, the piece went viral. Readers flooded social media with comments, sharing their own frustrations with modern life. Some dismissed Elias as an outdated relic, but many others praised his insights. For the first time in years, people started talking about what really mattered, and Lyra knew this was only the beginning. Unbeknownst to her, powerful forces in the city were watching closely. Elias' words were inspiring hope, but they were also threatening the status quo. And soon, Lyra would find herself caught in a battle much bigger than she ever imagined. The next morning, Lyra woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. Her article about Elias had gone viral overnight. Thousands of people were reading, sharing, and discussing his advice. Some praised it as a wake-up call. Others dismissed it as outdated nonsense. But one thing was clear. Elias' words had struck a nerve. As Lyra scrolled through the comments, she noticed something unusual. Amid the praise and criticism, there were a few messages that stood out. One's warning her to stop spreading Elias's ideas. At first, she thought they were trolls, but then she received an anonymous email. "Stop writing about him. You don't know what you're meddling with." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Who would send such a message? And why did they care so much about an old man living quietly outside the city? The corporate response. Later that day, Lyra decided to visit Elias again. She wanted to warn him about the strange email and ask if he knew anything about it. When she arrived at his house, she found him sitting on the porch, sipping tea and gazing at the horizon. "Back already?" he asked with a faint smile. "I need to talk to you," Lyra said, pulling up a chair beside him. "Something's happening." She showed him the email. Elias' expression didn't change, but his eyes grew darker. For a moment he was silent, then he sighed deeply. "I was afraid this might happen," he admitted. "They've been watching me for years." "Who's they?" Lyra asked. "The corporations," Elias replied. "The ones running Nova Prime. They profit from the way things are now, the machines, the implants, the endless upgrades. If people start questioning their systems, it threatens their power." "But your advice isn't dangerous," Lyra protested. "It's just common sense. To them, it's dangerous enough." Elias said grimly. "Common sense can spark rebellion." Lyra frowned. "So what do we do?" Elias leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You keep doing what you're doing. Spread the truth. But be careful, they won't hesitate to silence us." A growing movement. Over the next few days, Lyra threw herself into her work. She wrote more articles about Elias's philosophy, highlighting how chasing perfection had led to societal problems. She shared stories from readers who resonated with his message. A mother tired of being replaced by robots at work, a teenager struggling with social isolation caused by virtual reality, a factory worker angry about losing his job to automation. Her words ignited a movement. Protesters began gathering in the streets of Nova Prime, holding signs that read "Progress, Happiness," and "Less is More." Inspired by Elias, they demanded changes. Fewer machines, more human connection, and policies that prioritize well-being over profit. But not everyone supported the protests. Powerful corporate leaders saw the demonstrations as a threat to their dominance. In secret meetings, they discussed ways to shut down the growing resistance. One name kept coming up, Elias Warren. "He's the source of this chaos," said a CEO during a high-level conference call. "If we eliminate him, the movement dies with him." A warning from Elias. Meanwhile, Elias continued living quietly, though he knew trouble was coming. One evening, as he watered his garden, he spotted a drone hovering nearby. It wasn't unusual to see drones in the sky, but this one lingered longer than most. Elias recognized it immediately, a surveillance device sent by the corporations. "They're getting closer," he muttered under his breath. That night, Lyra visited again. She brought news of the protests and the backlash they were facing. Protesters reported being followed, harassed, or even arrested without explanation. Fear was spreading quickly. Elias listened intently, his face calm but serious. When Lyra finished speaking, he stood up and walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of his living room. He opened it carefully and pulled out a small metal box. "This is why they're after me," he said, placing the box on the table. Inside is evidence of something extraordinary, something I discovered years ago but never revealed. It could change everything. What is it? Lyra asked, her heart pounding. It's complicated, Elias replied, but suffice it to say, it proves we're not alone in the universe, and that our current path will only lead to disaster. He hesitated, then added, I need you to take this box and hide it somewhere safe. If anything happens to me, you'll need to share its contents with the world. Lyra stared at him, stunned. Why me? Because you understand, Elias said simply, and because you're brave enough to fight for what's right. A dangerous mission. Reluctantly, Lyra agreed to take the box. Before leaving, Elias gave her detailed instructions on where to go. The hiding place was far from the city, an abandoned research facility buried deep in the wastelands. Getting there wouldn't be easy, especially since the area was crawling with rogue AI drones and other dangers. You'll need help, Elias warned. Don't try to do this alone. Lyra nodded. Over the next few days, she reached out to trusted friends who believed in Elias's vision. Together, they formed a small team, a tech expert named Ravi, a former soldier named Jax, and a medic named Tessa. Each had their own reasons for joining the cause, but they all shared one goal: to protect Elias's legacy. On the morning of their departure, Elias came to see them off. His face was lined with worry, but his voice was steady. Remember, he told them, this isn't just about saving me or exposing secrets. It's about showing humanity a better way forward. Trust each other, stay focused, and never lose sight of what truly matters. As the group drove away, Lyra glanced back at Elias standing in the doorway. She felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. Whatever awaited them in the wastelands, she knew they couldn't turn back now. The city on edge. Back in Nova Prime, tensions continued to rise. The protests grew larger, drawing attention from media outlets across the globe. Meanwhile, corporate agents worked tirelessly to discredit Elias and his followers, labeling them as extremists bent on destroying progress. Despite the mounting pressure, Lyra's resolve only strengthened. She carried Elias's box in a backpack, guarding it like a treasure. Every mile they traveled brought them closer to uncovering the truth, and closer to facing whatever dangers lay ahead. Little did they know, the journey would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. Sacrifices would be made, bonds would be forged, and the fate of humanity would hang in the balance. But for now, all they could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time. The journey into the wastelands began under a pale gray sky. The road ahead was rugged and desolate, littered with remnants of failed colonies and broken machines. Lyra sat in the driver's seat of an old, battered vehicle, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Behind her were Ravi, Jax, and Tessa, her small but determined team. Each carried not just supplies, but also a shared belief in the importance of their mission. Elias's words echoed in Lyra's mind. This isn't just about saving me or exposing secrets. It's about showing humanity a better way forward. She repeated them silently, drawing strength from his calm resolve. As they drove farther from Nova Prime, the air grew colder, and the landscape became increasingly hostile. Abandoned buildings loomed like skeletons against the horizon, their windows shattered and walls crumbling. Rogue AI drones patrolled the area, scanning for intruders. Every sound, a distant hum, a rustling breeze, made the group tense. First encounter. On the second day of their journey, trouble found them. They were navigating through a narrow canyon when a drone suddenly descended from above, its red sensors locking onto their vehicle. Get down, Jack shouted, grabbing his rifle. He had been a soldier once, and his instincts kicked in immediately. The drone fired a warning shot, narrowly missing their car. Lyra slammed on the brakes, and everyone scrambled out, taking cover behind rocks. We can't fight it head-on, Ravi said urgently, pulling out a handheld device. Let me hack its system. While Jax provided cover fire, distracting the drone, Ravi worked quickly. His fingers flew across the screen as he attempted to override the machine's programming. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, the drone froze midair, its lights flickering before going dark. That should hold it off for now, Ravi panted, wiping sweat from his brow. But there'll be more. They piled back into the vehicle and sped away, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. No one spoke for a long time, each lost in their thoughts. Later that evening, as they set up camp, Tessa tended to a minor cut on Jax's arm caused by flying debris during the attack. Lyra stared into the fire, her mind heavy with worry. What if we don't make it? She asked quietly. What if they stop us before we even reach the vault? Jax looked at her, his expression steady. We'll make it. We have to. Not just for Elias, but for everyone counting on us. His words reminded her of why they were here, to honor Elias's vision and give humanity a chance to change. Lessons along the way. As they traveled deeper into the wastelands, the group faced new challenges that tested their courage and unity. At one point, they encountered a pack of feral robots, once domestic helpers, now corrupted by years of neglect. These machines moved erratically, attacking anything that crossed their path. During the chaos, Tessa tripped and twisted her ankle without hesitation. Jax carried her to safety while Ravi disabled the robots using EMP grenades. Later, as Tessa rested, she admitted feeling guilty about slowing them down. "You're not slowing us," Lyra said firmly. "We're stronger together. That's what Elias taught us, remember? Humanity survives because we support each other." Tessa smiled weakly. Maybe he was right about everything. These moments of reflection bonded the group further. They realized that Elias' advice wasn't just abstract philosophy. It was practical wisdom that applied to their situation. Working together, trusting one another, and staying focused on their goal kept them moving forward despite the odds. A sacrifice. By the fourth day, they finally reached the abandoned research facility where Elias had hidden the evidence. The building was half buried in sand, its entrance sealed by rusted metal doors. Using tools from their gear, they managed to pry it open and step inside. The interior was dark and eerie, filled with dusty equipment and cobwebs. Following Elias's instructions, they navigated through winding corridors until they found the vault, a heavily fortified room protected by advanced security systems. "This is it," Ravi whispered, examining the keypad. "I can crack it, but it'll take time." Suddenly, alarms blared and robotic guards emerged from hidden compartments. The team sprang into action, fighting to hold them off while Ravi worked frantically to unlock the vault. One of the robots cornered Tessa, trapping her against the wall. Without hesitation, Jax charged toward her, shoving her aside and taking the hit meant for her. Sparks flew as the robot exploded, leaving Jax lying motionless on the ground. "No!" Lyra screamed, rushing to his side. But it was too late. Jax was gone. Tears streamed down Tessa's face, but she forced herself to stand. "We finished this," she said hoarsely, "for him." With renewed determination, they fought harder. Moments later, Ravi shouted, "It's open!" Inside the vault, they found a single metallic case containing the evidence Elias had described. As Lyra held it in her hands, she felt a mix of grief and hope. Jax's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. They would ensure his bravery mattered. Heading back, with the case secured, the group prepared to leave. The journey back would be just as dangerous, but they knew they couldn't afford to rest. Before stepping outside, Lyra paused to look at the others. "We've come so far," she said softly, "and we've lost someone dear to us. But Jax believed in this mission. Let's honor him by finishing it." They nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Together, they climbed into the vehicle and drove off, leaving the ruins behind. Behind them, the sun began to rise, casting golden light over the barren land. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild, reconnect, and rediscover what truly matters. The return journey to Nova Prime was tense and exhausting. Lyra clutched the metallic case tightly, feeling its weight both physically and emotionally. Every mile they traveled reminded her of Jack's sacrifice and the responsibility resting on their shoulders. Yet, despite the grief, there was a quiet determination driving them forward, a belief that Elias's message could still inspire change. As they neared the city, the skyline came into view. Shimmering towers stretched toward the heavens, but instead of marveling at their beauty, Lyra saw them for what they truly were, symbols of humanity's obsession with progress at any cost. She thought about Elias's words, "Progress isn't worth it if we lose ourselves." For so long, people had chased perfection without considering the consequences. Now, it was time to show them another way, revealing the truth. When they arrived back in Nova Prime, the city was alive with tension. Protesters filled the streets, holding signs and chanting slogans inspired by Elias's philosophy. Corporate agents patrolled nervously, trying to maintain order. The movement had grown exponentially since Lyra left, fueled by her articles and the public's growing dissatisfaction with the status quo. Lyra gathered her team and addressed a crowd in the central plaza. Her voice trembled as she began speaking, but soon it grew steady, carrying conviction. "We've come here today not just to share a discovery," she said, holding up the metallic case, "but to remind you of who we are. This box contains proof of something extraordinary, evidence that humanity is not alone in the universe. But more importantly, it carries a warning. Our current path will only lead to destruction." She opened the case and revealed its contents, a holographic recording of the alien signal Elias had intercepted decades ago. The message played aloud, its tone calm but urgent. "Beware the cost of perfection. Balance is key. Survival depends not on domination, but on harmony." A hush fell over the crowd as the words sank in. People exchanged glances, some nodding, others whispering among themselves. The message wasn't threatening. It was a call to rethink priorities. Lyra continued, her voice rising with passion. Elias Warren spent his life teaching us these lessons. He showed us that real progress comes from connection with each other, with nature, and with ourselves. It's time to listen. Corporate backlash. Not everyone welcomed the revelation. Corporate leaders, fearing the loss of control, launched a smear campaign against Lyra and her team. They labeled the alien message a hoax and accused Lyra of fabricating evidence to incite rebellion. Agents were dispatched to arrest her, but the protesters formed a human shield around her, refusing to let her be silenced. For days, the standoff continued. Tensions escalated until finally, one courageous CEO stepped forward during a live broadcast. His name was Victor Kane, and though he represented the very system El Jun Shai Ke,